lot of people have never had money and they don't need money. So we get rejected like that a lot because, you know what? They don't care about that stuff. They don't care about your money.
Because when people close to Frank Fritz finally stepped inside the home where he had been living, the atmosphere reportedly felt unsettling almost immediately. Not dramatic. Not chaotic. Just sad. And that's what stayed with people. For years, fans remembered Frank as the loud laugh from American Pickers. The guy who could walk into a collapsing garage and somehow turn forgotten junk into hidden treasure. He looked alive doing it. Excited. Curious. Like he genuinely loved every dusty corner of America he explored. But behind closed doors, something else had quietly been happening for a long time. And no one fully realized how serious it had become until much later. Because according to reports, what was found inside Frank's mansion wasn't shocking because of luxury, or scandal, or some wild celebrity secret. It was shocking because it looked like a man slowly disappearing in real time. And honestly, that may have been the hardest part to accept. There were reportedly rooms filled wall to wall with clutter. Forgotten belongings stacked in corners. Narrow paths through piles of collectibles. Dust gathering on things that once probably mattered deeply to him. At first glance, some people online treated it like another strange celebrity story. But the more details emerged, the heavier the situation started to feel. Because this wasn't really about mess. It was about isolation. And once people realized that, the entire story changed. But what happened next made it even more emotional. Before all of this, Frank Fritz looked like someone who had built the perfect life for himself. When American Pickers exploded into one of television's biggest reality shows, Frank became instantly recognizable across the country. Alongside Mike Wolfe, he traveled through small towns, back roads, abandoned barns, and forgotten buildings searching for pieces of history most people overlooked. And viewers loved him because he never felt manufactured. He wasn't polished like a movie star. He wasn't trying to sound perfect. He felt real. That was his power. When Frank laughed, it sounded genuine. When he got excited about an old motorcycle or rusted gas pump, people believed him. And when he joked with Mike on camera, it felt less like television and more like two longtime friends sharing a life together. That chemistry became the heart of the show. Millions tuned in every week because it felt comforting. Familiar. Honest. But sometimes the people who look the most comfortable on camera are hiding struggles nobody fully sees. And slowly, quietly, cracks started forming underneath everything. At first, they were easy to ignore. Frank began speaking publicly about health issues. Chronic pain. Crohn's disease. Exhaustion from years of travel and filming. Fans sympathized, but most still assumed things would eventually stabilize. Then something shifted. Viewers noticed subtle changes in the dynamic between Frank and Mike. Conversations felt slightly shorter. Interviews carried a different energy. Small pauses started appearing where easy laughter used to be. Nothing dramatic. But enough for people paying attention to feel that something wasn't fully right anymore. And once audiences started noticing those little moments, they couldn't stop noticing them. Then came the disappearance. Frank suddenly stopped appearing on the show, and fans immediately started asking questions. Where was he? Why wasn't he filming? Was he sick? Had something happened behind the scenes? At first, the answers sounded temporary. Recovery. Health issues. Time away. But the silence stretched longer than anyone expected. And that's when things took a painful turn. Reports began surfacing that Frank and Mike's friendship had fractured badly behind closed doors. Frank later admitted publicly that they had not spoken for years. Years. That detail shocked fans more than almost anything else. Because people hadn't just watched them work together. They watched them grow together. Or at least, that's what it felt like. And suddenly, viewers started looking back at old episodes differently. Moments that once seemed funny now felt heavier. Conversations carried tension nobody noticed before. But the truth behind Frank's personal life was even more heartbreaking than people realized. As time passed, Frank became increasingly isolated from public attention. His appearances became rare. Interviews slowed down. New photographs of him online immediately sparked concern among fans. He looked different. Quieter. More withdrawn. Like someone carrying exhaustion deeper than physical pain. And according to reports, the struggles happening privately had become far more serious than most viewers understood. There were mobility issues. Ongoing pain. Long periods away from public life. Then came the moment that changed everything. The stroke. When news broke in 2022 that Frank had suffered a major stroke, the public reaction was immediate. Fans across the country suddenly understood that this wasn't just a television personality stepping away from the spotlight. This was someone fighting through an incredibly difficult personal battle. And that's when attention slowly shifted toward the home where he had been living. What people reportedly discovered inside left many emotionally shaken. Because the mansion didn't look like the home of someone living comfortably in retirement. It looked frozen. Like life inside had slowly narrowed over time. Rooms reportedly crowded with collectibles. Dust settling over forgotten belongings. Tight walking spaces through piles of objects accumulated over years. And honestly, what disturbed people most wasn't the clutter itself. It was what the clutter seemed to reveal emotionally. Because on television, Frank had spent years rescuing abandoned pieces of history. He built an entire career around finding value in forgotten things. But inside his own home, it reportedly felt like parts of his own life had quietly started piling up around him the same way. And that realization hit people hard. Because no one expected this from someone like Frank. For years, he represented freedom. Adventure. Endless road trips across America chasing hidden treasure. But now, the story felt painfully different. And then things became even more emotional. As concerns about Frank's condition grew, reports about legal guardianship discussions and family involvement started becoming public. People close to him reportedly began helping manage decisions about care, finances, and long-term support. That's when fans realized just how serious the situation had become. Frank wasn't simply recovering privately anymore. His entire world had changed. And behind all the headlines was something people couldn't stop thinking about. He seemed deeply alone. The friendship with Mike Wolfe that once defined American pickers still felt emotionally fractured in the public eye, even after Mike later publicly asked fans to pray for Frank following the stroke. And honestly, that public message affected people more than expected. Because it sounded sincere. Regretful. Almost reflective. Like someone realizing time had moved faster than anyone wanted. And suddenly fans began revisiting old episodes again. The jokes felt different. The chemistry felt more fragile. Even small moments between them carried emotional weight knowing how things eventually unfolded. That's when the story stopped feeling like celebrity gossip. It became something much more human. A story about pride. Distance. Health. Friendship. And the quiet ways people can slowly drift apart while believing there will always be more time later. But sometimes, there isn't. And that's what makes this story feel heavier now. Not the headlines. Not the mansion. Not even the clutter. It's the feeling that somewhere along the way, one of television's most recognizable faces slowly became isolated while millions of people still remembered him as the smiling version they watched every week on screen. And maybe the most painful part is that the warning signs may have been there much earlier than anyone wanted to admit. Small pauses. Less energy. Distance between old friends. A man who once looked fully connected to the world slowly becoming quieter over time. But because he kept smiling. Because the reruns kept playing. Because viewers wanted to believe everything was still okay. Most people never fully saw it happening. Until they finally looked inside that house. And by then, the silence surrounding Frank Fritz felt louder than anything he had ever said on television. So what do you think about Frank Fritz's story? Do you believe fame and isolation slowly changed his life behind the scenes, or do you think the signs were there long before the public truly noticed? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy emotional Hollywood stories that reveal what was really happening behind the fame, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Because the next story might completely change the way you see another celebrity you thought you already understood.